The day I decided to buy the $900 junk house was the day my life changed forever. It wasn't an impulsive decision, though to my family it may have seemed like one. I had been saving money for years, not for luxury or extravagance, but for freedom, the freedom to make my own choices without constant interference. When I first saw the house online, I was captivated not by its flaws but by its potential. It was small, battered, and in desperate need of repair, but it spoke to me in a way that no family-approved plan ever had. I could envision myself there, working on it, shaping it, and creating a space that was entirely my own. It was almost like the house was calling me, whispering promises of independence and self-discovery. I remember the moment I told my family. I gathered them in the living room, trying to sound calm and rational, explaining my reasoning. I had saved for this, I told them. It was a modest investment, far less than most people pay for a deposit on a rental. Yet, as soon as the words left my mouth, the atmosphere shifted. My sister's eyes widened, my father's jaw tightened, and my mother, who rarely expressed anger, went completely silent. They had expected my savings to go toward her retreat, a spiritual, self-improvement retreat she had been planning for months. According to them, my money wasn't mine to spend on a dilapidated house, it was supposed to fund her happiness, her experience, her dreams. When I explained that I wanted to invest in my own future, their response was immediate and hostile. "You're being selfish," my father said, his voice sharp and commanding. "This isn't about you. It's about family. How can you put your desires before hers?" My sister's voice cracked as she added, "We were counting on you. You promised me." Their words hit me like a physical blow. For a moment, I questioned myself. Was I truly being selfish? I looked at the house online again, imagining the peeling paint, the broken windows, the overgrown yard. Yet somehow, I felt a surge of determination rather than doubt. I wasn't doing this to spite them. I was doing this to claim something for myself, something I had never allowed myself to have before, ownership of my choices. The tension escalated quickly. Dinner that night turned into a confrontation. My mother sat quietly at the table, wringing her hands, while my father lectured me about responsibility, family duty, and sacrifice. My sister alternated between tears and accusations, insisting I was destroying not just her plans, but our family's unity. I tried to reason with them, explaining how a house, no matter how small or imperfect, represented stability and a place where I could begin my own life. I told them that the retreat, while meaningful for my sister, was not my responsibility to fund. I suggested compromises, even offering to contribute a smaller amount if it helped, but the argument spiraled out of control. Their disappointment wasn't about money, it was about control. They could not fathom that I might choose a path that did not align with their expectations. By the end of the night, the decision was made for me. My father stood, his expression hard and unyielding. "If you choose that house over your family, then you are on your own. We cannot support your choices anymore." It wasn't phrased as a question, it was a decree. The air in the room was thick with tension, fear, and betrayal. My sister's tears were like knives to my heart, but there was nothing I could do to make them understand. I had to leave, at least emotionally, to protect my own sense of self. I packed a small bag, taking only the essentials and a few personal items. As I walked out the door, I felt a strange mix of grief and exhilaration. Grief for the family I loved but who could not accept me, and exhilaration because for the first time, I was stepping into the unknown on my own terms. The journey to the junk house was surreal. I kept replaying the confrontation in my mind, wondering if I had made a mistake, questioning whether independence was worth the loneliness. When I arrived at the property, the reality of the house struck me. It was worse than the picture suggested. The windows were cracked, the roof sagged, and the yard was overrun with weeds. Yet standing there, looking at it with my own eyes, I felt a strange sense of pride. This was mine. It wasn't perfect, but it was authentic. I could work with it, shape it, and in doing so, I could shape a life that belonged to me. That night, as I slept on the creaky floor of the living room, wrapped in a thin blanket, I thought about what my family had said, about their accusations of selfishness. I realized that their anger came from fear, the fear of losing control, the fear of seeing me carve a path that didn't include them. For the first time, I understood that my life didn't have to be dictated by others' expectations. The house, shabby and cold as it was, represented my first real step toward autonomy. It symbolized courage, independence, and the start of a journey where I could finally prioritize my own dreams without guilt or apology. And even though I was scared, even though I missed my family, I felt a spark of hope that perhaps, just perhaps, this choice would lead me to a life I could truly call my own. The first few days in the junk house were some of the hardest of my life. I had imagined that stepping out on my own would feel liberating, but reality hit me like a ton of bricks. There was no running water, the electricity was patchy at best, and the house smelled of mold and neglect. Every floorboard groaned under my weight, and the windows rattled with even the slightest wind. Sitting alone in that empty space, I couldn't help but feel the full weight of what I had done. I had left my family, abandoned the life I knew, and invested in a property that everyone else had deemed worthless. The house was a physical representation of the risk I had taken, and for a moment, the fear of failure almost paralyzed me. Despite the challenges, there was a strange thrill in tackling everything on my own. I started by cleaning, removing layers of dust, cobwebs, and broken remnants left behind by previous occupants. Each room told a story of neglect, but I began to see the potential underneath. What others had seen as flaws, I saw as opportunities. The cracked walls could be patched, the garden could be tamed, the roof could be repaired. Every small improvement felt like a victory, a reminder that I was capable of more than my family had ever allowed me to believe. I learned to appreciate the smallest successes, a functioning faucet, a repaired step, a freshly scrubbed floor, because each one meant I was reclaiming some control over my life. The neighbors, however, were not as supportive. On the first day, as I struggled to haul a broken piece of furniture into the house, a few of them stopped and laughed. One of them even asked if I was serious, calling it a death trap, and warning me that I would regret it. I felt a flush of embarrassment, and for a moment, I doubted myself. But then I remembered why I was there. I wasn't trying to impress anyone, I was building something for myself. That realization gave me the strength to keep going. Slowly, I began to win over some of the neighbors. They would stop to offer advice or lend tools, and occasionally, a small compliment would escape their lips when they saw how much progress I had made. Those moments, brief as they were, became powerful motivators, reminding me that even in isolation, effort and perseverance do not go unnoticed. Every day brought new challenges. A leak in the roof during a storm soaked the living room, forcing me to patch it quickly with tarps and makeshift solutions. The old stove refused to light, leaving me to cook on a portable burner. The garden, wild and overgrown, required endless hours of clearing, planting, and pruning. There were times when I sat on the porch, exhausted and frustrated, questioning whether I had been foolish to leave the comfort of my family's home. Yet each problem also brought a lesson. I learned to improvise, to research solutions online, to accept imperfection, and to take pride in progress rather than perfection. Slowly, the house began to feel less like a prison and more like a canvas for my growth. The emotional struggle was perhaps the hardest part. Calls and messages from my family went unanswered, leaving a void that made me question my decision. I missed them terribly, especially my sister, even though I knew she had been upset. Nights were the hardest, filled with the silence of the house and the memories of family dinners and conversations I no longer had. I felt alone, but for the first time, I also felt responsible for my own happiness. I began journaling, pouring my thoughts and frustrations onto the pages, and in doing so, I discovered a strength I had never known. The isolation, though painful, forced me to confront my fears and build resilience. Months went by, and the house started to transform. The walls were repainted, the roof patched, and the floors repaired. I salvaged old furniture and repurposed it creatively, giving the rooms character and warmth. The garden bloomed with flowers I had planted, and a small herb patch became a source of pride and practicality. Each improvement reinforced my sense of independence, reminding me that the life I wanted was achievable if I was willing to work for it. Even small interactions with neighbors began to shift. One afternoon, an elderly woman who had been skeptical at first stopped by with a basket of homemade bread. She smiled at the changes I had made and complimented my dedication. It was a quiet acknowledgement, but it meant more to me than words could express. Eventually, even my sister reached out. Her initial curiosity was tinged with hesitation, and our first conversation was awkward, filled with unspoken tension. She asked how I was managing, and when I told her about the progress, she was visibly surprised. The admiration in her voice was tentative but genuine. It didn't erase the hurt or the earlier conflict, but it was a sign that my efforts were being recognized. For the first time, I realized that my choices, however unconventional, could command respect when backed by determination and hard work. By the end of the year, the junk house was no longer a joke. It was a home, modest but full of character, shaped by my hands and my choices. The house had become more than just a place to live, it was a symbol of perseverance, independence, and self-respect. Every crack, every repaired floorboard, every patch of flowers in the garden told a story of struggle and triumph. Living there taught me that growth often comes through challenge and that standing up for oneself, even in the face of criticism, is one of the most courageous acts anyone can undertake. In the end, the house I had bought for $900 became priceless, not because of its monetary value, but because of what it represented, the first step in a life that I could call truly my own. Life in the junk house was not easy, but it was mine, and for the first time in years I felt a strange kind of freedom. Every morning, I woke up to the creaking floors, the peeling paint, and the faint smell of dampness, and yet, I couldn't stop smiling. This house, which everyone had laughed at, which my family had dismissed as worthless, suddenly felt like a blank canvas. I realized that I could shape it exactly the way I wanted. I could fix it, decorate it, and turn it into a home that reflected me, not their expectations. At first, I spent days just cleaning and sorting through the debris. Broken furniture, old newspapers, and remnants of previous tenants were all scattered across the rooms. I found joy in small victories, fixing a leaky faucet, patching a hole in the wall, or even just making the kitchen functional. Every minor improvement gave me a sense of accomplishment, something I had rarely felt in my family's judgmental environment. What surprised me the most was how much I learned about myself in the process. I had never been particularly handy or creative, but necessity forced me to adapt. I watched countless tutorials online, asked neighbors for tips, and experimented with different techniques. Sometimes I failed miserably, ending up with crooked shelves or paint stains everywhere, but every failure felt like a lesson rather than a defeat. Slowly, the house began to take shape. The kitchen became surprisingly cozy, with mismatched but functional cabinets, and the living room started to feel warm when I added old rugs I had salvaged from thrift stores. The garden outside, which had been overgrown and wild, became a small sanctuary where I planted flowers and herbs. Every improvement, no matter how small, reinforced my sense of independence and pride. Meanwhile, the silence from my family was deafening. Initially, I tried calling my parents, but the calls went unanswered. Messages went ignored. It was as if my decision to prioritize my dreams over their expectations had made me invisible to them. At first, it stung deeply. I missed their presence, their guidance, even if it came with criticism. But over time, I realized that their absence allowed me to focus entirely on myself. There was a strange comfort in knowing that I had no one to please but myself. I could make decisions freely, without worrying about judgment or disappointment. I started keeping a journal, documenting the changes I made to the house, the challenges I faced, and my personal reflections. Writing became therapeutic, a way to process emotions that had been bottled up for years under my family's expectations. One afternoon, while painting one of the walls in my bedroom, I had an unexpected visit from a neighbor who had been watching my progress quietly. She was an elderly woman with kind eyes and a soft voice, and she told me she had seen the house when I first moved in and had been skeptical, like everyone else. But seeing the effort I had put in changed her mind. She praised my dedication and told me she admired my courage. That brief conversation sparked a revelation. The opinions that truly mattered were not those of my family, who judged based on control and tradition, but those of people who could see effort and resilience. It was empowering to realize that respect and recognition could be earned, even outside of the family I had grown up with. Months passed, and the house continued to transform. The once broken-down structure now had a sense of life and personality. I started inviting a few friends over, and for the first time, I felt proud of where I lived. My sister, who had initially thrown a fit about the retreat money, called me one evening, curious to see how I was doing. She was shocked at the changes and, reluctantly, praised the improvements. The conversation was awkward at first, filled with unspoken tension, but I noticed something different in her tone, a hint of respect, perhaps even admiration. That small acknowledgement was all I needed to understand that my choices were valid and that I was capable of building a life on my own terms. Living alone in that house also taught me lessons about patience, resilience, and self-reliance that no amount of family approval could ever have provided. I learned to troubleshoot problems, manage finances, and make long-term plans independently. I also discovered the joy of solitude, the satisfaction of achieving something purely through my own effort, and the beauty of embracing imperfection. The house, once dismissed as worthless, became a symbol of my growth and determination. Every crack in the wall, every squeaky floorboard, every scar from a misadventure in DIY work was a reminder that progress often comes with struggle, and that struggle is worth it when the end result is something you can genuinely call your own. By the time I had finished the major renovations, I realized that the journey was far more important than the house itself. The $900 junk house had become a catalyst for self-discovery, independence, and confidence. My family may never fully understand my decisions, but it didn't matter anymore. I had proven to myself that I could take control of my life, make mistakes, learn, and grow. That house, which had started as a joke in everyone's eyes, had become the foundation of my new life, one built on courage, resilience, and the belief that following your own path, no matter how unconventional, is sometimes the bravest thing you can do.